Welcome to Verbal Pick Radio, where we give you a verbal image of life, and we are everyday people. Personally, would like to welcome you all to the show. Now, I'm sitting outside. This is a nice day out. I'm watching all these birds just flying, enjoying life, right? Birds, nature. And I didn't see these birds tell blackbirds, hey, look, buddy, you can't fly in our airspace because you're blackbirds. They're just enjoying life, right? And I thought about this critical race theory, right? And first it says that the truth shall set you free. Critical race theory is like the descendants of Nazi Germany telling the Jews not to teach on the Holocaust because it's upsetting the descendants of Nazi Germany. Right. The truth. The truth is mainly to make sure that ugly history of the past called slavery will never happen again. It has nothing to do with people's feelings and emotions. But if you feel privileged, then you want to dictate and narrate every facet and every aspect of life. And people are sick and tired of it. So I wanted to go and really delve a little deeper into critical race theory and where it derived from. And this is coming from the New Yorker, and it was written by Lauren Michelle Jackson this past July 2021. And mainly it's given its founder, Derrick Bell, right? And how it became known as critical race theory. So bear with me, you guys, tonight, and let's go up on this journey on critical race theory. It starts in 1971. Derrick Bell, a 40-year-old civil rights attorney, became the first black professor to gain tenure at Harvard Law School. Right now, we're going to give you a little history on the man, Derrick Bell, and it will bring you into critical race theory. Okay. A soft-spoken and prolific scholar with glasses and a short fro coming to a widow's peak. Bell was a Pittsburgh native and Air Force veteran who, meaning he fought for this country, who before his career in academia had worked with Thurgood Marshall, composing legal strategies against school segregation in the South. Now, segregation, me personally, I felt that we should have united, came together and build our own communities, not go to the ghettos, meaning, we wanted, coming out of slavery, we wanted to live in certain areas, and they relegated blacks to ghettos like they did in Germany with the Jews in Nazi Germany. You all can only live here. I'm saying, let's create our own geographical location that we build up and educate and build our economy and do business and trade with others, right? Like they do in Chinatown. Now, we did try that with Black Wall Street, and it was burned to the ground, but we should have our own military and fighting force to make sure that doesn't happen again, meaning we don't want to be like victims while wolves just come prey on us and we're helpless, No, we want to strive and conduct ourselves to be successful. Okay. So where were we? Here we are. We were right here. He worked with Thurgood Marshall composing legal strategies against school segregation in the South at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and as the Deputy Director of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. At Harvard, he created and taught the school's first course of its kind on civil rights law, providing students the only sanctioned opportunity for left of liberal legal training on the inner working of race and power. As a scholar, he published studies such as Serving Two Masters, in which he argued that the pursuit of racial balance in schools following the landmark ruling in Brown versus Board of Education was eclipsing effort to improve the quality of education for black children, leaving civil rights lawyers compromised between their clients' interests and the law. Bell was a knowing token of sorts. It became untenable for them to be in all-white institution, he recalled of Harvard in an interview in 1993. The status quo was better stabilized by moving in this direction a little bit, but over the years, Bell grew increasingly displeased with the school's stagnant hiring practices regarding minority professors. He threatened to leave, and in 1980 he did, moving on to the University of Oregon to become the dean of its law school. He would later resign from that post and from a second post at Harvard over the institution's resistance to hiring women of color. Upon his departure from Harvard, constitutional law and minority issues was dropping from the curriculum. The following academic year, the Black Law Students Association met with the school's dean, Jane Vorenberg, urging that the course be continued and that a black professor qualified to teach it be hired. According to the scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, who was a Harvard Law School student at the time, Vorenberg asked the students what was so special about constitutional law and minority issues. In terms of hiring, would they not prefer an excellent white professor over a mediocre black one? Rebuking this false choice, the students compiled a list of 30 black professors whom the school might consider. All 10 of the professors hired that year were white. In the spring of 1982, Vorenberg announced a 3-week course on civil rights litigation to be taught by 2 part-time hirees, including the prominent white civil rights attorney Jack Greenberg. To the students, this was a placative offering which would remedy neither the void in their legal training left by Bell's departure nor the need for a full-time minority hire. They boycotted the mini-course and held rallies and sit-ins. In response, the dean sent a letter to second and third year students lodging what was more or less an accusation of reverse racism, protesting the course because it was co-taught by a white lawyer, worked against not for shared goals of racial and social justice, he wrote. Even the civil rights leader, Bayard Rustin, in a letter to the Times, chastised the students for what he said was their blatant racism. Never mind that many of the students who joined the protest were white. This was Harvard, after all. At a picket outside the course's first session in January of 1983, Crenshaw, in her third year at the school, gently refused such framings. This whole charge of reverse racism has done what it was intended to do, to obscure the real issue, she told an AP reporter. Harvard Law School declined to comment. In the midst of this protracted conflict, the students, led by Crenshaw and other future scholars and professors of law, Mary Matuzda, devised a means of accessing the education that they needed. They designed what they called the alternative course, premised upon a concept of the law not as a static, neutral entity, but as fundamentally political, more robust than a reading group or a workshop. The course featured guest lecturers such as Charles Lawrence, Linda Green, Neil Gottenda, and Richard Delgado, all experts in the legal dimensions of civil rights who were developing studies of the law as a racial document. The alternative course laid the groundwork for understanding not only racism within the law, but also how law was constituted element of race itself. In other words, how law constructed race. As the editors of Critical Race Theory, the key writings that formed the movement. From 1995, its core text was a book from 1973 by the man who had inspired the program's funding, Bell's Race, Racism, and American Law. The course, Crenshaw later wrote, set it in motion a chain of events that would provide fertile ground for the emergence of critical race theory, a term that, along with intersectionality, she has been credited with coining. The alternative course cannot be counted as the sole genesis of critical race theory, which became a multidisciplinary movement that draws from the work of a lodge of theorists, including Antonio Gramsci, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Jacques Derrida, that's Derrida. In earlier movements, critical legal studies, ethnic liberation groups, with contributions from legal scholars across the country. The core premise of critical race theory, that the invention and reinvention of race enabled the status quo and that liberal solutions prove insufficient. Liberal solutions prove insufficient, have been applied in recent decades within fields from education to disability studies. But the ideological necessity of the course at Harvard Law in the early 80s is key to understanding the role that critical race theory has sought to fill within post-civil rights American writ large. The Machian bent of popular American race narratives would incline us towards discerning what happened at Harvard in terms of conservative against liberals, racist against people of color, but the architects of what would become critical race theory saw things differently. Harvard administrators at the time possessed what they considered and what students considered a liberal view on race. Vorenberg and the students shared a desire to work towards justice and diversity. Crenshaw and other members of the Black Law Students Association, Donald Christopher Tyler, recalled in the Crimson the fact that administrators could condemn race-based discrimination while also dismissing the study of race-based power, exemplified the blinkered insight of the liberal doctrine. The vocabulary gifted by civil rights bias discrimination amounted to a Pyrrhic win for racial discourse. The era's legal victories outlawed only what the justice system narrowly understood race to be. As Richard Thomas Ford, a professor at Stanford Law School, put it to me recently, critical race theory is a reaction to a conventional liberal account that says, well, if we just carry on with the mainstream civil rights project, we will get to racial justice. Lately, of course, the niche legal movement has found itself at the center of the culture wars as a new boogeyman of the political right. Conservatives want it gone. Liberals, in turn, insist that it's necessary. Yet few from either squad seem to have thought much about what exactly it is. something, something, race, something, something, history, something, something, America. That seems to more or less summarize the thinking behind HB 3979, a bill recently signed into law by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, which seeks to regulate civic education in public schools by, among other things, stipulating that teachers should not be compelled to discuss current events or currently controversial issues, and most sensationally that students, i.e. white students, should be spared any sense of blame, guilt, or other psychological distress on account of belonging to a dominating race or sex. HB 3979, which goes into effect this fall, does not name critical race theory explicitly, but it is the most high profile of cluster of new pieces of legislation prompting hand-wringing over the term. Last month in Florida, the State Board of Education banned critical race theory by name and also the 1619 Project, the Times endeavor that foregrounds the arrival of African slaves in the founding narrative of American national identity. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, appropriating the colorblind language of liberalism, has expressed his fear that critical race theory might cause people to think of themselves more as a member of a particular race based on skin color rather than based on the content of their character. Know how, as in the case of the critics of the Harvard boycott, progressive rhetoric is called upon to suppress a feared education. It should not be difficult to sell a reasonable person on the idea that the critical race theory of conservatives' imaginations had little to do with critical theory as such. Writers and scholars such as Adam Harris, the New Yorker's Jelena Cobb, and Benjamin Wallace Wells, and Crenshaw herself, exhibiting a patience that we, the people, do not deserve, have more than adequately demonstrated that campaigns against critical race theory have in fact used the term to arouse generalized fear about the implication of liberal race talk, from cultural competency seminars to the cancellation of public figures. In a recent interview with Wallace, Wells, Christopher Rufo, nominally a journalist, boasted of his part in turning critical race theory into a right-wing target. He explained that he'd gone truffle hunting for incendiary ideas in the works of scholars such as Bell, Crenshaw, and Angela Davis, whose names he had found in the footnotes of anti-racism bestsellers. In terms of its ability to foster racial hysteria, critical race theory struck Rufo as more promising than reigning buzzwords such as woke or cancel culture. It was the perfect villain, he told Wallace Wells. So they want to villainize the term critical race theory, to scare Republican whites and whites in the suburbs and whites in the rural areas, as though black people are getting a leg up and they want to take over the educational system. We must fight. And I told y'all before, white folks' God is Odin, the god of war, and they know how to drum up the war beat with terminology such as criminal race theory to get them all into hysteria, and they all come out of the woodworks. We gotta stop this, what they trying to do to our children, when basically all critical race theory is teaching black folks the law, teaching the history of what took place so it'll never take place again, and by some feeling guilty about that, or even feeling that they're going to lose some type of privilege or position, or they don't want to change their ideology and the way they think towards race, then they feel like, hey man, this is a need for a fight, let's fight. And the thing about it is, hey, separation is coming. And I hate to say it. I mean, we fighting on so many different fronts from critical race theory to voters' rights. Every generation, every year is something new. And people are actually getting fed up with it. So black people, do what you want to do and enjoy your life. And don't worry about if you upsetting somebody and what they think and what you shouldn't do and how they feel about it. And, oh my God, how could you do this? The hell with them. Be you. Bro Pick Radio. We're out.